A while back, I did some research on a device called Seminite, which is a invention from an Indonesian inventor named Aji Khandro, and I produced several videos on it. And since then, I've been busy with other projects, but there was one variant of Seminite that I have turned back to and been using pretty regularly, and I want to share that with you. This is one of my Seminight devices. I made this probably about 4 years ago. Still use it for research purposes, but I really haven't done much with them. And part of the reason is there was something about it. I couldn't figure out what it was. Just something didn't feel right about it. Well, recently I had some problems with some health issues, and I have video on that also, and I was having trouble sleeping. And I've had good success with certain other devices as far as that would help to sleep. But I remember that when I was working with the Aji coils and making the Seminite, Aji uses what's called a right-handed coil. If you look into compression springs, it will tell the difference between a right-handed and a left-handed coil. Aji's coils were right-handed. And I found that they stimulate hydrogen, and they also produce a positive ion charge. And they also, when I used them, they made me sleep really deep. And I didn't like that. When I was corresponding with Aji, and English is not his, I don't think he speaks English, he uses a translator, but when I was corresponding with him, and I asked him about that, why I was so tired around them, he said it's because you need to sleep more. You need to let your body rest. Well, I didn't like that idea at all, so I started making the left-handed Aji coils, which stimulate oxygen and give more energy and have a negative ion charge to them. But a year ago when I was having health issues and sleeping problems, I remembered that conversation with Aji. And I thought, I should go back to the Seminite and figure out what it is that I'm having trouble with the Seminite, why I have this bad feeling about it. But before I go any further, I need to explain something that if you're not used to my videos, this will sound really bizarre and crazy, but I have an ability as a dowser. And what it is if my body wants something, and I hold a pendulum, and this is just a little crappie fishing bobber. If my body wants something, my hands will start to twitch in a direction that will cause the pendulum to swing clockwise if my body wants it, counterclockwise if my body doesn't want it. Now, it looks absolutely bizarre and crazy and far-fetched, but it works. And I have quite a few videos about it and the things that it has allowed me to identify and research. And also with this, I'm actually able to, using a certain form of it, identify 118 elements off the periodic table. Now, it sounds crazy, but check out my other videos and you'll see the background on it and the things we've tested on it. But when I wanted to find out what is wrong with the Seminite, I checked first, and the morphic field that forms around it on this particular device, which is quite dry. The morphic field gets bigger if it's wet. This is only going out like, a couple feet, 2 to 3 feet. And the morphic field goes around it like a circle, like a ball around this. That's why I've got it up on the footstool here, on the step ladder. But as I was checking it, I thought, well, that doesn't explain why it feels so weird. And then I was doing research on the cement, and cement has got aluminum oxide in it. But when I went to check for aluminum, let me get away from the ladder itself, I did not get the aluminum. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I started doing a thorough check, and when I got even with the device, I picked up aluminum and oxygen. the dome goes around it, the morphic field goes around it, but at this level, there is aluminum oxide that goes out within that morphic field, and my body picks up and detects aluminum oxide from the cement. Now, I have high aluminum oxide already in my body that I'm trying to get out because of the problems that I had with using a leaf blower on an aluminum oxide floor, an aluminum floor of a reefer trailer. And I explained that in my other video. So my body was detecting and responding to the presence of aluminum oxide that was in the morphic field from this device. So I thought, well, I've got to then make a device that does not use cement, so it doesn't have the aluminum oxide that's in it, and I have to use the right-handed coils that Aji had designed and worked with. So I went back to one of the original devices that I had made even before I was testing out the Seminite, before I even poured the first cement. And it was a jar, glass jar, full of coils. And on the original one, I had used left-handed coils, and I had put in diatomaceous earth. So this time I twisted up Aji's right-handed coils, and they, as you can see, have the right hand turn on them. And I tried the diatomaceous earth, and it did not feel right. So then I tried putting in rice to see what rice would do, and that didn't feel right either. Then I tried oatmeal, and that didn't feel right. And fortunately, because of the way these are, you can actually pull them out and screen out whatever stuff you've got in there. So I was actually able to keep using my coils. And finally, I found out that if I use protein powder in here, that gives the carbon necessary to start the morphic field, and it is protein that my body always needs more protein. That then is in the morphic field instead of aluminum oxide. And this is what I have been using and sleeping with. And it's very convenient because, like when I tried with the spirit bowls, they have water in them and I can sleep good with those, but they tend to spill in the night, which is kind of a mess. I've also tested out a cardboard device for getting the cavernous structure effect, and that helped us sleep, but that was a pretty big and cumbersome device. This thing here is fairly small and easy to keep next to me in bed, and it doesn't spill, and it's very convenient. And as soon as I get it completely filled up with coils, I have to make a few more, then I'll top it off. And this is the protein powder that I'm using, Suzanne Summers Vanilla Cream Protein Shake, adding that to that, and this works out really good. Now, if you've not seen the other Seminite videos that I have made, let me take you really quick on how to make these coils. The most inexpensive way of making these coils is actually to use network wiring, because you're after about a 23 gauge copper wire with an insulated coating on it. And this is Cat 6 networking cable that I got from Home Depot. This is about 33 cents a foot. I got 20 feet of it for this demonstration and to finish out this one jar. And by the way, this is my second jar. The other one I keep in my truck, but now I need to fill up this one for at home. So that's why it's not complete. I've had the other one full and been using it for months and had real good success with it. That's why this one is incomplete and I have to finish it up. This is for the home model. But anyhow, to process this, you can buy rolls of 23 gauge copper wire with insulated coating on it. You got to make sure though, when you buy wires, whether it's network, cable, or whatever, that it is 100% copper. Some of them will have an aluminum wire, or at least wire that has aluminum in it, and that does not work because when you go to bend up the coils, they will simply unwind because aluminum doesn't hold the curve that you need to put into it. So this is the cable, and let me show you how I process it. If you peel back the insulation on these wires, you'll see that you actually have 4 pair of wires in here, so that gives you 8 wires total, which is where the cost savings comes in. Now, some of these come with a strand of like dental floss that runs through here, and you can actually yank on that dental floss, pull it out the side, and it will actually cut through the insulation to make it easier to pull it off. This one doesn't have that, so we're going to actually pull all 4 cables out one way, pull the insulation out the other way to separate them. Sometimes when you're pulling the insulation one way and the wires the other way, it will snap off. The insulation will snap off just like that. Now to get it started again, what you do is just find one of these strands, one of these pair, and just pull it out the side, and that will start the insulation slicing again. But you don't want to go down the entire thing because this turns as it goes down there, and you'd be doing a lot of unwinding if you tried to pull this whole thing out. So this is just enough to get it started again, and then you can go down and just pull the whole pair out the side like that. Okay, so I got all the insulation off. You could see how many times it broke, and that was just in 20 feet of wire that I had. And here's my 4 pairs, and these are twisted together, so I'm going to have to separate the pairs out. And in order to do that, what I need to do is to take 3 of these and tie them off onto something that's stationary. And for me, I've got a vise here, and it's the easiest thing for me to do is just clamp them in the end of the vise, and then I can get on the far end of this grouping at 20 feet on the far end. I'll pull on the orange pair, and then I'll repeat the process, freeing up one here and then pulling on the far end till I get them all separated. Okay, I got them all separated. It's kind of funny, this is the first time I've done it it's about freezing temperatures out here, and these wires did not want to come out, so it was not an easy pull, not an easy separation. But normally if it's warm or in the summer or inside the house where things are warmed up, they pull out pretty easy. But here we are. Now the next thing is you've got to be able to separate the wires on each of these pairs. And it's kind of difficult to do, and I asked Aji about it, and he showed me the trick that he does. Aji takes a pair, and then one of them he ties off somewhere. I'm putting that in my vise. And then you start to pull on using your fingernails, start to pull on the one that is free, and it actually starts to slide down. You can see it's actually sliding down the other wire, but you can't keep grabbing it here, otherwise it will pinch and then stop coming. So you kind of have to, as it builds up along here, let's stay in the shade here so I don't have the lighting problem. As it builds up, you got to keep pulling, moving your fingers along with the part that's building up. And eventually it will slide completely out. And then you see I've got it tied off and I've got this mess here, but you can just pull on it and just let that go through your fingers, and you pull on it, 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 and there we go. Got all those off of it, and then you go back up here and you take your tool, loop it around it once, pull it with a little bit of tension, and that will take all the twists out of it. And there we go. Now for winding up the Aji coils, the dimension you need is of 3 millimeters, which is about the size of the ink cartridge on a disposable pen. So what I did is I went into Home Depot and I looked at where their metal and rods were, and I got a metal rod that's about 3 millimeters across. And so then I took and I put it on my drill, and I used the drill and the rod to wind it up. Now for winding up this wire, we're going to be using right-handed Aji coils. That means if you take your right hand and put it around the shaft, you're going to want this wire coming off the same as your pointer finger here. So in order to do that, we need to attach this into the chuck. So let's stick that into the chuck there. And then we're going to have this thing twisting counterclockwise. This shaft is going to have to twist counterclockwise. So let me turn it on here. Oh, wrong way. There we go. Counterclockwise. And you can see what it's doing. It's building it up. Twisting it for me. And just to double check, it's coming off the bottom of the shaft, just like my finger. On my right hand would come off the bottom of the shaft. And so then I like to just squeeze it between my fingers here and just let it wind up, and you can see how fast we're winding. And if you have where it does something like that, you can actually just push them together. There we go. And that will close that off. Okay, now we're going to push this together, and now we can just slide the entire thing off the chuck and off the rod. Now the next thing that you need to do, it's kind of counterintuitive, after you have everything packed so nice and tight, is you actually need to stretch this back out again. You need to get some space between them, but you don't want them so loose that another wire from another spring is going to be able to slide in between there, which this one does not. So we're good. We're not too big. But you stretch it out for two reasons. One of which, you're going to be cutting these per length. And the longer each coil is, the more pieces you're going to get out of it. You get more bang for your buck. And the second reason that you want to stretch them out is when you're cutting them to length, if the length is too long, you can always take and compact it, and it will actually shorten up to the size that you want. Now this is actually best to do if you're using the rod that's on the drill. Before you take it off the rod, stretch it out slightly, and you can actually just take both ends and just pull on it. And the advantage then too, if you do it while it's still on the rod, because if you have a time where you stretch it out too much, let's say we stretch it out, it's like, whoa, that's way too much. While it's on the rod, you can just pack it back together again, and then you're fine. So we're going to stretch it out. And again, you just don't want it too much that another spring is going to fall into that one. So we got it stretched out there, and there we go. You're going to want to do this to all of them. That's about right. Well, now it's time to cut these coils up. This end piece here, don't even need to mess with that. We can snip that right off. And the tool that I'm using is a small wire cutters. They also make for trimming fingernails and toenails a cutter that is very small like this. The smaller the better, because if it's a big cutter, when you go to cut through the cable, it will tend to spread them out on the ends. And what you're going to want to do here is to shoot for 1.3 times the width of the other spring. So you can see where 1 time is, and then you want to go like one more loop down from there. And let's see if I can do this right. There. Now let's see how we're looking here. There you go. That's about 1.3 times the width of the other spring. And that's what you want them all to be. And you really need to take your time and get these cut right, because if you get down to 1 time the width, basically there's no energy there. And if you get up to over 1.5, to 2, the energy drops off, and they're basically wasted coils. What you're going to want to shoot for is about 1.5 down to preferably 1.3. I don't know if that's a magic number somewhere in there, but that's where the energy flows off these things. So, just got to take your time and snip away. And if it looks like it's too short, you can actually twist the spring, and you can see it will walk itself upward to adjust to where you want to be, because you really want to take your time to get these as good as you can. Let's snip one here and see how we're doing. That one there is still within the ballpark. Still larger than 1 and smaller than 1.5. And here is where it is helpful, because if you cut one and it's too long, you can just take and squish the spring so it's down to about 1.3. So that's another reason why the adding the extra, stretching them out, makes them more workable. That one's a little big. We can just squish it down just a little bit. And you just need to take your time and go through and cut them all. Now here is where it helps to do this on a white fabric like this, because now you can take your pieces that you've cut and take a look at them and see if they're any too long or too short. The short ones can be stretched out, the long ones can be compressed, and these all look good. So we'll add that to our container and keep adding them up. There we go, there's another coil complete. We'll spread these out. Look for any unusual ones. This one here has got a little bit of a, oh, that's just the insulation hanging off the end. No, these all look good. I don't see anything too out of the ordinary there. And we'll add that to our container. My container is almost full. I'm going to have extra for another project. Yeah, we're almost topped off here. Looks like I'll have just enough room in there to top it off with protein powder, and it will be done. And if you're going to make one of these, let me know what you feel, what you experience. I find that this is very, very soothing, very helps me to sleep deep. Let me know what you find. But it's a fun project and well worth the time.